Martin, welcome back.
Well, welcome back to yourself.
But here we are, and we're back with the vlogs straight through now. So every week, don't worry, here we are. So this week, Mark 7, 30, what is it?
31.
No,
Is
wait
it?
a minute.
No. Anyway, it's a bit of Mark 7.
It's the last part of Mark 7, which is this Syrophoenician woman whose daughter has a demon, and also a man who is deaf and dumb, and Jesus heals both of them. But the dialogue en route is the really chewy part of this. So do you want to tell us a little bit about it and your take on it?
No, just my thoughts. So first of all, I think it's just interesting to notice the way that Mark, and obviously the Syrophoenician woman is what I'm going to focus on. That story is in Mark and Matthew, and Mark kind of plays themes through the gospel. So we've had a theme of Jairus's daughter. Now we have the Syrophoenician's daughter, and
just to be clear, Syrophoenician, I mean, that's basically Lebanon, isn't it, in terms of present day?
Syria.
So Jesus has gone north here, out of his normal territory.
Well, he's been in Tyre, hasn't he? So it's gone north. So these are Gentiles, and these are foreigners with all the prejudices you have about foreigners. Then we've also we have with Jairus's daughter the story of the woman with the hemorrhage, and there's some interesting parallels in the way that she was described and her actions of falling before Jesus and so forth and asking him for healing. There are interesting parallels between her and the Syrophoenician woman. So Mark's sort of he's doing something here with the way he's telling this story, the way he's cast the story. He wants us to make these connections. And as you say, I mean, the puzzle is what on earth is going on in this dialogue. And I don't think, you may think differently, I don't think you can dodge the fact that Jesus calls herself and her compatriots dogs. That's plainly what he's doing in this dialogue, and I think we have to really kind of struggle with that. And maybe there are ways of slightly ameliorating the impact, but one of the things that I think is going on is there's something about the relationship, and this may be why Mark and Matthew picked this up particularly. There's something about the relationship between, thinking about the people who are reading these gospels, hearing these gospels, between the Jewish converts and the Christian converts. And it's almost, I was thinking, how on earth do I make sense of this? It's almost that something quite blunt has to happen to expose the feelings that lie behind the struggle between the relationship between Jewish Gentiles and Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. That somehow this brings it to the surface. Yeah. Jesus is bringing that antagonism to the surface. Now, of course, one rabbi remarked, if any other Jewish leader had said this at this time, Christians would be all over him, accusing him of being, all over Judaism, accusing them of being prejudiced. So we've kind of put Jesus in a special case here. We're trying to excuse or apologize or explain it. But I do think there is something around how do we bring to the fore the real tensions that underlie our relationships within the Christian community, and actually speak straightforwardly about it, so that we can have the proper conversation we need to have. The other couple of points that have struck me is that, that Jesus talks about picking up the, you know, I won't give the crumbs to the dogs, and she says, she responds saying that, you know, the crumbs that we can eat the crumbs from under the table. And if you cast back to the feeding of the 5,000, what were there? There was a huge amount of leftovers. So somehow this is saying that there is plenty for the gospel to be shared with these people who have been perceived as beyond the pale. And I think, you know, that for me, that helps me think, all right, there is something here going on about the relationship between Gentile Christians and Jewish Christians that we need to take seriously and then apply in our own particular contexts. But it is a hard passage. It is a difficult passage.
Well, I'm with you on that point about the Jewish and the Gentile Christians, and I think Jesus is holding up a mirror here to the disciples, and he's actually embodying that which they may be thinking but are not articulating.
Yeah, that's right. Exposing it, bringing it to
exposing it. Yeah. But it's a pretty dangerous strategy.
Yeah. No, it's a very risky strategy.
and as you say, in the 21st century, that's a very quick route to being persona non grata anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, some people argue that the Syrophoenician woman changes his mind by the way in which she is in response to him. But part of me struggles with that, because my assumption is Jesus is pretty sussed. You know, the end of John chapter 2, he knew all people and needed nobody to testify about anybody because he knew what was in all people. This is a master psychologist. This is somebody who knows what's going on. So I'm not entirely sure that, you know, that convinced by that idea that the Syrophoenician woman's tenacity kind of changed his mind. It's interesting the talk about dogs, as you say, because of course if you look in the Bible, I don't think there are any positive references to dogs anywhere. It's not a dog lover's volume, the Bible, is it? I mean, you know, they return to their own vomit. They generally eat things they shouldn't. They're not pleasant animals.
No. Well, you didn't have them for pets for a start. They were just kind of scavengers.
But that's the point. In Jewish households, they kept them outside. They were never allowed inside. Whereas in Gentile households, such as in Syrophoenicia, you could have dogs inside, and what's more, they could be pets and they could eat the crumbs from the table. So when he says, you know, don't give, you know, take what's the children's food and give it to the dogs, he's very explicitly speaking from a Jewish perspective. And she, in response, is very explicitly speaking from a Syrophoenician perspective, which is, even the puppies under the table eat the crumbs that fall from there. In other words, I'm from a completely different place in a completely different context. Now, my assumption is not that Jesus is having his mind changed by this, but he's embarrassed the disciples by his hostility to this woman, which embodies theirs, and then demonstrating through her the tenacity of her faith, which probably outstrips that of the disciples at that time, responds to it and shows the fruitfulness of that faith.
Yeah, I suppose I am a bit sceptical about there being such a sharp difference between the treatment of dogs from the Jewish culture to the Syrophoenician culture. I mean, I don't know enough about that to be able to argue one way or the other, but
it's secondary source. I wasn't there.
I was assuming I could press my point without too much contradiction. But I think the other point that you make, which I think is there, is that over and over again in Mark's Gospel, you've got the persistence needed to demonstrate faith.
Yeah.
That you know, there is something about keeping going, pressing on, asking again, pursuing, that is actually what Jesus is looking for. There's a test going on here.
Yeah.
He could have just turned around and said, "Go," you know, as he did with Jairus, said, "Go home, your daughter's you're cured."
And I guess the other point we shouldn't lose is that the Syrophoenician woman is not acting on her own behalf, but that of her daughter. Just as with the second healing, people bring the deaf and dumb man to Jesus for him to break into his isolation with healing. So there's something also here across these passages about intercession on behalf of others in bringing others before our Lord.
A quick story about Stuart Blanche, who was the Archbishop of York many
Yes.
donkeys years ago.
Heard of him?
His wife was invited to open the fete for a deaf charity, a charity for supporting deaf people. And the person introducing her went on and on, introducing her interminably. She stood up and said, "Ephatha."